Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop, and I haven't posted in a while because I've been working on competition entries for the Ohio show, which, as a reminder, is coming up March 21, 22, Independence, Ohio, at the Holiday Inn there, and I'm looking forward to being there, competing there. I've got some videos prepped of some of those entries. I'll show those after the competition is over in March. So a little bit of a dry spell here, but I'm still here. I haven't gone away. I'm starting a new project. This is going to be a Hen Pintail Decoy with a keel and all. And I've done a Drake Pintail on my channel, have not done a hen. So we'll look at that next. I've kind of jumped ahead. I started with Tupelo blocks, and if you want to see how I bandsawed out the body and the head, that process is repeated every time. Look at the Mallard series, Drake Mallard series. That'll show you how I lay out the bird on the blocks with my patterns, and side view, top view, and the same thing with the head on a smaller block of Tupelo, and get those cut out on the bandsaw to this point. But I won't repeat that in this series. Again, you can refer to that if you need to. But I don't want to just duplicate that every time. He's cutting out another decoy. So try to keep the content new here. Hen Pintail, very graceful, beautiful bird. Love the birds. Let's get started. If you're enjoying my channel, please hit the subscribe button. That does help me out. It's totally free. I'll keep it that way. This is a channel that I'm building with resources for people that might want to carve decoys or wildfowl. Have carved, still carving, never carved. The feedback I'm getting all across the country and even worldwide has been very humbling and rewarding, and I appreciate it. Okay, there's always a little prep work before we start carving, and I like to start with the head to get it shaped up and begin to see life in the bird and determine how it's going to interface with the body before I carve that. So we'll work on the head to begin with, but I wanted to mention a couple of things before we start carving. I've got a study bill here, so we'll take a quick look at that, of the Hen Pintail. I also wanted to mention I made a keel out of 1-inch thick walnut, 1.5 inches deep, and I sealed that up with DevCon 2-part epoxy. I like to seal the internal, the keel screw holes, and also the anchor line hole with 2-part epoxy. And once that's cured, finish the keel, and I seal that up with probably 4 or 5 coats of Prolux semi-gloss. So the keel is ready to go. We'll come back to that later. The layout work that I've done, I wanted to mention the bill on this study bill is a little shorter than the bill that I have on my pattern. So from the tip of the bill to the cheek, a little bit shorter than my pattern. I'm going to stick with my pattern because obviously there can be various size ranges depending on the age of the bird, etc. And I like the little longer bill, so I'm going to go with that. So I've got that laid out on the piece of head wood. I've got the pintail profile laid on here. I got this distance from the tip of the bill to the cheek, laid that on here. The angle then from that junction point back past the eye. I've also penciled in the neck and determined that I want a slight angle on the head here, so I penciled in the neck on the body. And now we can begin taking some of this wood off. I'm going to start with a coping saw. Just a quick look at the study bill, maybe a little closer. Very kind of delicate bill, pretty straight, rounded at the tip. Good size nail, proportional to the bill. Small nostrils, pretty close to the face here. V-notch, pretty deep. So the return is back, comes back quite a ways, then curls down, drops vertically, and then comes back to this little smile area between the upper and lower mandible. The lower mandible extends back further than the upper mandible, so we're going to want to carve it that way. All right, let's get going. I'm going to use the coping saw to remove this wood. This is an example. I wanted to show this depending on the neck position. If I use my coping saw to cut this bill out, I'm going to down to this point, which I normally do. I'm going to cut into the neck. So this is an example where I'm going to get it partially cut, go in from the side, and then I'll have to finish that with grinding eventually. But we'll go ahead and get the profile of the bill pretty much established with the coping saw. And I always cut on the outside of the line so that when I sand this smooth, I'm coming back to the pattern and not making the bill too narrow. I'm checking on the underside to make sure I'm hitting my pattern. This is again where I'm going to come down to this point and this point, stop, and then I'll have to go in from the side using this as the guideline so I don't cut into that neck profile. So that gets the majority of the bill established. I'll have to take that little angle piece off to get the cheek positioned correctly with my grinding equipment, which I will do. Now I'll make this angle cut and take off this piece of wood. I'm going to take a look at the neck underneath and make sure I'm not cutting off too much wood there. Looks like I'm going to be okay, so I'm going to angle towards this guideline that I've given myself on the side of the bird. And that is strictly a guideline, but usually that's back past the eye just a ways on most ducks. Like that. I'll get the other side done and then come back. Now I'm going to use the bandsaw to clip off the back edges here to begin to round the back of the head and neck and just take a quick little angle cut. Again, paying attention to those vertical guidelines I've given myself so I don't cut too much off here and don't have enough for the cheek width. So pretty quick work of that. Now I want to go back and pick up this area. If I shape up the bill the way it's cut right here, that bill is going to be way too short. So I need to get back to my guideline down here, strike a line, and remove that material so the cheek position is correct. So I'll use my straight edge here, reestablish the line now that I've cut that away, and we'll remove that piece of wood with the grinding equipment. I'm going to use this little 1/4 inch burr, and the end of this burr has teeth on it as well, so I can use it like this, like an end mill, and just make pretty quick work of trimming that little excess off. And now the bill length will be correct and its position against the cheek. All right, now I want to position the notch, get that located. And on the study bill, from the tip of the bill to the cheek there, I'm comparing that to this dimension. They're very close, just a little bit less of a distance here. So we'll do the same thing on the pattern. Since the bill is a little bit larger, I'm going to get that tip of the bill to the cheek dimension, and it's going to be a little bit less than that center line. It's about 3/8 of an inch in between. So I'm going to use that dimension here, 3/8 of an inch. And since these are relatively close, other than the length of the bill, I'm just going to look at the distance of the notch back from the center back to the tip of the notch point there, and transfer that just so I know how far back that should go. And that looks pretty good. So I had that just about right just by eyeballing it. Now we can begin to take wood off to form the bill. The crown is going to be 1.5 inches wide from my reference materials, so 3/4 of an inch on either side of the center line. And that is going to go right into that notch. Come out to the 1.5 inches wide, go back down, narrow back up on the back of the head. All right. I think we've got enough guidelines. We can start carving, defining this notch at the beginning. Okay, I'm going to run this at 2 times speed, and I'm using a little 1/8 inch ruby bit, cylindrical in shape, 1/8 inch diameter. And I'm using it to lower the bill on either side of the notch here. I like this little bit because it has grit on the end of it as well as on the sides, so I can use it in multiple directions. And now I'm just taking the bandsaw marks off and rounding that notch area a bit. I like to use a pencil like this to see, it helps me see areas that still need to be cleaned up, and there were a few here. Take care of that. Now I'm back to regular speed. I'm going to shift to this 3/4 inch burr, saber tooth burr, fine tooth. And you can see I've got the cheek and the eye groove penciled in there through the eye up to the bill. And we need to remove material both sides to narrow down to the crown width above here. So I'm headed for that guideline. And I can't emphasize this enough with these burrs. Keep your hands out of the way. Easy to say, hard to do sometimes, but there's not much to hang on to here. So you're going to see me continually reposition my hands to try to keep them as far away from the burr as possible for safety. And I'm going at this slow. That's another tip. Don't press too hard on these burrs. If you happen to run into some funky grain, the burr has a tendency to jump, and you don't want that, especially when there's not much to hold on to. So I'm working again to that guideline on top, and now I'm beginning to round the back of the cheek. And I want to take some material out here in the neck area so that we form kind of an hourglass shape from the front. So I'm using the tip of the burr to kind of form the lower edge of the cheek there, and then I can take this neck material down, and I've penciled in the neck dimension down below, and I'm working towards that dimension, towards that pencil line right here. So I can use this burr to remove a lot of material, and then I'll switch to smaller burrs to get into the tighter spots, like under the neck there. I can get a little bit, but I can't get all of the way in there. So again, I'm working to that. I've got most of the material out of that area, but I'll have to clean up with a ruby bit later. I'll take a little more off the back of the head here and narrow that up in back. And now I can use this to take some material off the upper mandible and begin to round that, and also round the cheeks so that we have nice soft curves, no shelves, no hard lines that are going to cast a harsh shadow. And we want nice soft look to the bird. When you're working in wood, trying to convey softness is a real challenge because it's such a rigid material, but those soft curves are really important in the way the bird is going to project. I've got that pretty much shaped up. Got a little more work to do back here. You can see my center line there. I'm going to work towards that center line and just round the back here of the neck. Take a little more off the bill here. I don't want to cut out too much right now. I'm just kind of getting wood out of the way. I'll do that on this side and then come back. All right, we've got that shaped up, and now I mentioned I couldn't get under the neck with that big burr, so I'm using a kind of a bullet-shaped ruby bit here to go under and clean up all my bandsaw marks and round this neck so that we cast a little bit of a shadow under the cheek and blend that into the surrounding area. You can see I rolled off the end of the piece of wood there with my ruby bit, so even the ruby bits have a tendency to want to grab and roll every once in a while, so just be careful out there, power carvers. This is a good bit just to kind of clean things up and remove burr marks and do some final shaping before sanding. This gets a lot of the roughness out of the way, and then I don't have to sand as much. I'm just cleaning up the bandsaw marks under the chin here and rounding the cheeks. Checking my symmetry again from the front to make sure I've got things relatively symmetrical. I want to take a little bit more material off in this area. You can see I pointed to, I use overhead light. I've got a shop light right over my bench here, and I use it all the time to take a quick look at things and see what kind of shadows are being cast. You'd be amazed how a shadow cast can really give an awkward look to a bird and take life away from the bird. All right, now I'm going to go to my pattern. I want to begin to establish the shape of the bill here as it meets the cheek. So I'm getting a dimension there from the tip of the bill back to where it meets, where the upper and lower mandible meet on each side, back here. So I know roughly how far back I'm going to have to pull that cheek under here. I'm going to get a quick dimension too from the bottom of the cheek up to where that rictus is, where the upper and lower mandible meet in the corner, and just make sure I have that dimension established on both sides. Very easy to get the bill off from one side to the other. And that's okay when you're looking at a side profile, but if you take a look at other views, it starts to look whopper-jawed. So I'm going to go back to my little 1/8 inch ruby cylinder and use that to remove this material. Kind of penciled in the area that I want to remove material. I'm going to get the divider out of the way so I don't injure myself. I'm just following my pencil guidelines, and I want to take the width of the bill, maintain the width of the bill back into that area of the face. And I'm also using the edge of this bit to define the upper notch points here. That's not the right term, but hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. I don't have all of my anatomy terms down pat. Working on the other side, same thing. So I'm working to establish the actual shape of the cheek and the bill as it meets the face here. And then removing material after I cut a little groove to establish the shape, removing material in both directions. I'll speed the video up here since we're using ruby bits. This is at 2x speed, and I just want to show enough of this process that you get a feel for. I'm using this bit just to clean things up and continually shape the bill, checking symmetry, using my pencil now because it makes the symmetry more obvious with pencil marks on there. Now I'm shifting to a little cone-shaped or triangular-shaped bit, and this is good for, now that I have this material cut back on each side, that left a little shelf, and I need to blend that back into the face, and that's what I'm doing here. Just rounding everything back now that we have that relieved back far enough that we can put in the lower mandible down there. I'm going to pencil this in, take a look at it. Okay, I'm back to normal speed now, and I'm going to use my dividers, and I'm getting that dimension from the tip of the bill to the corner where the upper and lower mandible meet, giving myself a mark on both sides. Now I'm going to look at my study bill and take a look at the shape of the upper mandible, that little corner upturn, and I'm going to pencil that in on my carving. And we'll put a little separation between the upper and lower mandible here. There's not a lot of the lower mandible showing, but now I can switch to the knife and very carefully score that line between the upper and lower mandible. And I'm rocking my knife down so that I don't peel through that lower mandible. If I push too hard with the tip of the knife, it's going to push right through there. Now I'm cutting down about a 1/16 of an inch so that I can go underneath, score this material, and take out that little triangular section. You can see the shadow cast there of the lower mandible. Now I'm back on the carving bench. I've done that with both sides, and I'm using this little ruby bit again to clean things up. A lot of times the knife will leave a little bit of rough wood in the area, so I'm going back with the tip of this ruby bit and just cleaning everything up around the lower mandible. And making sure that that cheek blends into the lower mandible there with nice soft transitions. Taking the edge off that lower mandible so it's not just a sharp point, sharp edge, I mean. And now I'm just going to work for a while to round things up and clean things up. Now I want to take that lower mandible and continue the line back into the chin here a little bit on either side. So I'm just making a small cut here and here. And there's not a lot of wood coming out there, but that puts the lower mandible at its proper size, and it also puts the lower mandible into the face there and begins to form that notch underneath. Now I've got a little ball ruby, and I'm just going into the corner here, and I want to clean things up, make a nice clean corner there where there's a little bit of messiness from the cutting that we've done in that corner. That looks better. Now I'm going to use my 1/2 inch sanding drum with 150 grit paper, a Swiss sanding cloth, and I'm going to go over the entire head carving now and use this to finish shaping things. You can see I'm shaping the bill as I'm sanding it here. And this Tupelo is soft enough that you can do some shaping with 150 grit sandpaper on a 1/2 inch drum like this. So I'm doing a lot of my final shaping with this tool, rounding the tip of the bill to the proper shape, taking the edges, sharp edges off the upper and lower mandible. I'll speed the video up here. Okay, we're at 2 times speed. I just want to show you enough of this sanding process to not put you to sleep, but give you a feel for how I'm using this tool. Removing all the bandsaw marks and doing final shaping of the eye channel, the cheeks, and blending everything together. And I'll go over the entire head that way and then come back. All right, I've got that sanding done. Now I want to establish the eye width, and I've got a dimension off my pattern from a Pat Godden pattern book so that I know that that's an accurate dimension. And I need to take material out and form these eye channels. I've got a little ruby bit to do that here. I'm going to cut a channel first and then use the side of the bit to round back into the cheek and then up into the crown. A lot of people ask me, how do you know, eye width and dimensions like that? And I always refer them to Pat Godden's website at goddenart.com because Pat sells individual patterns. He's an 18 or 19-time world champion. He spent time in aviaries getting accurate dimensions, and it's the best resource I have found for getting a dimension like this, the distance between the eyes. So I've got that set right now. Little shout out to Pat Godden. Now I'm going to finish things up with this 1/2-inch sanding drum again and just blend that out so that I don't want to trench there. I just want nice, soft transition up to the crown and down to the cheek. Pretty light touch here, so I don't want to take off too much wood. I just want to take off all the tool marks and pretty much finish most of the sanding, and then I'll have to come back and hand sand as a finishing touch. But this gets me 90% of the way there. All right, that's probably enough sanding views. Just rechecking my dimension. Looks like I'm right on there now. And now that I have the eye dimension set, I can change tools, go back, get my saber-tooth burr, the 3/4 inch diameter ball nose saber-tooth burr, and use that to round the crown. And I'm going to try to not further reduce the width of the crown, and I pointed to the center line. I'm going to try to keep the center line intact so I don't lose the pattern that I've established for the shape of this head from a side profile, if that makes sense. So I want nice round curves here. You can see I'm pushing that burr away, and that's a good way to cut less aggressively. So when I'm doing some final shaping, oftentimes I'll be pushing the burr away from me. The rotation is less aggressive the way I'm set up to go in that direction. So a lot of times I'll be pulling it towards me to cut and remove material and then push it away from me to kind of finesse it. I'll go ahead and finish rounding that head, and then I'm going to be coming back with the sanding drum again and finishing the removing any burr marks and rough sanding. Just take a quick look at how things are shaping up. You can see that hourglass shape from the front. And now I'll shift to the sanding drum and just go over the crown and blend that in to the eye channel. This is, to me, an important area. I talked about that overhead lighting and trying to avoid shadows that don't belong. So I'm going to spend some time here in this overhead lighting, making sure I have nice soft curves again. You can see I am removing some of my center line, but just sanding over it because there are bandsaw marks that I need to get rid of on the top of the bird there. But with a light touch, those are gone. And then I can reestablish the center line. So I'll go ahead and finish the head sanding. I'll do some hand sanding as well, and then we'll come back. All right, now I want to put some cheeks marks on the bird and a little bit of structure behind the eye there. And I'm going to use this bullet nosed ruby bit to cut the cheek, a little bit of a trench in there, and then just round in both directions. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I want these to be nice and soft. So we don't want a deep trench that is going to cast a harsh shadow that looks awkward. But this will put a little accurate dimension to the face and some character to the bird. So again, I'm cutting the trench and then just using the edge of the side of the ruby bit. Same thing up here. I don't do this on every bird. On this bird, I want to cast a little bit of a shadow behind the eye here and ferre that into the back of the head. Make sure the cheek is pretty well defined there. So it'll take a little time to get these blends done, but shown you enough there. I'm going to go back to the sanding drum and smooth everything out. You can see I'm using the overhead light again. Take a look at where I need to do additional work. And you can see that's still pretty rough. So I'm going to use my sanding drum, and this 1/2 inch is just the right size to get in here and give me a nice soft transition into the cheeks and eliminate all of those tooling marks. Oftentimes there's different densities to the grain of Tupelo, and you'll hit hard spots and soft spots, and the sanding drum kind of takes those out, whereas the burrs can tend to leave dents or marks that need to be removed. All right, I'm going to sand this head, and I'll do some hand sanding as well, and then come back. Just a quick note on hand sanding. I use a rolled up older roll of 80 grit Swiss sandpaper for the rough sanding, and then follow that up with 150 grit. And then if I really want it smooth, I'll go to a 400 or something, but normally the 150 gets me where I need to be on these smoothie decoys. All right, I think that's a good place to wrap up session 1 of carving the hen pintail. Got the head roughed out. In the next session, we'll add details to the head, get the eyes installed. Till then, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you.